We're going to look at a Hogarth curve in a very traditional container. Whether you're going to love it or you're really going to hate it, stay to the end and see what I can create. So welcome back to today's tutorial. If you're still here, then well done. We're going to look at a really traditional design today, which is called a Hogarth curve. It's probably one of the most trickiest designs to learn. And what I'm going to do is, after I've made it in this very vintage, old-fashioned, very traditional container, I'm going to redo the same arrangement but in a more modern vase, because this style of arrangement at the moment is really very fashionable, and it's really inspired this very sort of natural boho trend that we're seeing at the moment. So if you've learnt flower arranging, you will probably be very familiar with this lovely little cherub that's holding up the vase. And this is going to be my container for today. I've borrowed this from a friend's flower shop, but I'm sure you could pick one up quite successfully in a charity shop. And I'm going to choose to have some white flowers to link in with my container and a couple of pastel flowers from the garden. So first of all, we're going to attach our foam onto the top. And I just wanted to show you that not only is my container old, but so is the dust on top. It's had a good wash, and I thought I'd leave the dust on the top just to make you laugh a little bit. I've got some floral foam, and when I make this design in a different style container, what I might do is use a pin holder or some chicken wire, so you get to see a different way of arranging. And I'm going to start for a minute with a fairly tall piece of foam. I'm not going to use all of that, but what I wanted to explain to you was a Hogarth curve is almost like an S shape. So it's got two C's, top and bottom. And to get that curve on the bottom, you need to have a fairly tall piece of foam. So this is over exaggerated, but you can't get a curve at the bottom if you're coming from the side of your foam. You have to come from a little bit higher up to sweep that flower or that foliage forward. So my first tip is don't go too stingy with your foam. The only problem with that is you've then got foam to cover at the end, and your design can sometimes become a little bit wide and you lose that very elegant shape. Okay, so when the cherub is facing forward, or angel or whatever she happens to be, I'm going to attach my foam to the container. And I'm just going to take it from front to back. Now, with this particular arrangement, a lot of the flowers are going to be coming into the foam from the side. So we don't want to fill that side section and cover the foam. We need as much foam clear as possible, but we need to work, I need to work on making sure that tape is thoroughly covered at the end. Now, the bottom part of my C is going to curve forward, and then the top part to make the S shape is going to fall back into the middle. So the top and bottom section need to be fairly similar. And what I've started to do with some eucalyptus is just to play with it in my hands to get it to form or start forming some shapes, some curved sort of shapes. And to get the shape for this particular arrangement, you really need to look at the way foliage is grown. So anything that you can bend or curve or shape slightly is going to work really well for this arrangement. Ruscus or rosemary or eucalyptus like I've got is really good. And the top part and the bottom half are going to be the same length. So we're not going to go taller at the top and smaller at the bottom. So by creating two fairly curved pieces, I've started to get my S shape forming. Now I've no idea whether that's backwards to you on the camera, but we've got that curved shape from top to bottom. And now what I'm going to do is place it into my foam. Let's just get that tape down so that we're creating the top part of my curve. And because the eucalyptus stem is quite thin, it might rotate slightly into the foam, but we can work on keeping that in a better position as we move along, and the flowers are going to support it. So now to get this front piece in position, I'm going to have to come quite high with it in the foam. If I place it on the side, my shape doesn't continue nicely down the front. So what I'm looking to do is to get the top of my S and the bottom of my S finishing in the same position. And that is the start of that Hogarth curve, that lazy S. And I think I've done a pretty good job there. The equal measurements, you can, if you want to do it so that the top section is taller than the bottom section, but ideally you need to have that S shape forming. So my outline is in. What I'm going to do now is to use some smaller pieces of the eucalyptus to strengthen that shape, bearing in mind that we don't want to go too wide on these side pieces here because you're going to lose that S shape. Now, if you're studying formal floristry or you're looking at flower arranging, then this is one of the basic shapes that you're going to learn. And lots of people are possibly going to comment in the box below that this is a really old-fashioned design, and Sharon, why are you teaching people old-fashioned designs? But what you've got to remember is a lot of the modern shapes that we get today have been inspired by these very traditional and old-fashioned shapes. So I'm going to continue that S, remembering that I don't want to overfill either side and lose my shape. So in this position here, I'm going to bring in some of the Florist leather leaf because this is shorter, it's more compact, and it's less fussy, so it's not going to be really detracting there on the side. And at the same time, I'm going to fill in the back so that my foam is completely covered. I don't want to come too heavy here in the middle because I really need to consider that S shape forming quite elegantly. So this is where I can use really short pieces tucked in close to the foam so that I'm not losing that shape. And this is often the area of weakness for many beginners when they try this shape. They overfill the sides and then you really lose that shape. So I've left the centre part of my foam fairly free so that I can add my flowers in, and then I can fill in as I go along to fill in any gaps or cover the foam as I go along. So hopefully you can still see that shape swinging round from one side to the other. Bearing in mind that if you are going to do this, you do need a really tall container. Obviously, the taller it is, the higher your arrangement can go. And the overall height of the arrangement is going to be very similar to the size of your statue or your vase or your ornament or whatever you use. Okay, so the next stage is going to be add my focal flower and my main flowers. And today I've got some beautiful dahlias, and I wish I could say they were locally grown, but our season hasn't quite started yet. But I've chosen white so it picks up with the colour of my base. And I'm thinking that this particular one that has already been cut to go in a previous arrangement is a little too large. So I'm going to look for one that's slightly smaller and isn't going to be too overpowering in my focal point. That one's a bit better. So if you think now where the middle of that S shape is going to be, I'm going to place my focal flower, my more dominant, larger flower there in the centre. It is going to look like that very dominating flower in the centre, but we'll move away from it in a moment with some slightly smaller dahlias. Now I'm a bit limited with the size of these flowers. They are all fairly similar in size, which is a bit of a shame because it would be nice if I could have smaller buds to go towards the outside. But this is what I've got to work with, and I'm not going to complain. So I'm trying again to sweep them through. If we look at it from the side, we've got that three-dimensional shape taking place. I'm going to add one in at the back just to give me a little bit of weight and to bring the colour through to the back. Remembering when you've got a tall vase like this, it is important to actually balance that design. We don't want to add flowers to the front that makes it then front heavy. bring a little bit of weight through to the back. I've got to check that when I'm looking at it from the front, this flower here isn't distracting, and it is, so I'm going to move it slightly further around the back. That should now not be visible from the front. And then with the two smaller dahlias that I've got, I'm going to come a little bit higher on the left hand side and then a little bit lower on the right hand side. And hopefully, because you've got that shape already formed with the eucalyptus, the straight stem of the dahlia is going to be hidden and masked by the shape of the eucalyptus, so we don't lose that crescent shape. Now this is the area that gets a little bit tricky. This is why I encouraged you to have some height in your foam right at the very beginning, because to get that angle you need to go upwards rather than crossways, and it might take me a little bit of fiddling around to get that in the right position without damaging my foam. And I'm hoping that that lovely sweeping curve is now exaggerated. And even though they were very straight stems, the dahlia stem itself was really straight. The eucalyptus on the outside is beautifully curved, so it's encouraging your eye to come round from one side to the other. So that's my main focal flowers in. Now I'm going to introduce a much softer flower, just so that your eye can casually move away from the big, larger flowers, and this will hopefully help exaggerate that shape as well. I'm going to start with some Verbena. So this is a garden foliage. It's nice and lightweight. There's a bit of a curve in that one, so that will help to draw your eye away from the arrangement. And then I'm going to use a slightly smaller one at the bottom. So again, if you're picking flowers from the garden, you really need to look at them. And if you're trying to get a curved design, then look for material in your garden or the florist shop that is got that natural curve to it. Not all flowers will do it, but learning and understanding how things grow is an important skill in arranging flowers. So now we've got to get that link. I've got some of the purple on the bottom and a small amount of it at the top. So I'm going to bring some through the middle, just a bit like you would do a dot-to-dot puzzle. We're linking the flowers together. Look at that one for a beautiful shape. There's a fabulous curve on that one, so that can come up high. And then I can bring some larger pieces more towards the front, a few pieces towards the back. That will help to balance off that arrangement and of course to give me that depth. Couple more. So a fairly narrow arrangement, which is one of the reasons why I encouraged you not to have too big a piece of foam at the very beginning. And I'm just going to pop my final one a little bit towards the back. So if we see it from the side, you can see that it's drawing your eye backwards. That's what helps with that three-dimensional effect and stops that design becoming really flat. And I think my last flower is going to be another garden flower. This time it's Japanese anemones. If you've got them in the garden, mine grow exceptionally tall. They're around 4-5 foot. But again, it's a flower that's fairly curved. And the head is angled slightly off to one side, so that's really going to help exaggerate the curve that I'm looking for. And then I'm going to do the same, exactly the same as I did. Use the curved pieces from one side to the other so that your eye is brought really rhythmically down from one side to the other. Look at those. Look at the size on those. Absolutely ginormous. Now, I'm not a great lover of these in the garden, but they are a great one for arranging with. They're also really loved by the wildlife, so it's a great one to have if you're encouraging butterflies and bees into your garden. The buds are really delicate and really small, and they last really well in floral foam, so it's a great one to have. And not all of them, not all varieties are as tall as this one here. You can get ones that are much smaller and much more manageable. Right, so we've got a few pieces, colour swooping really nicely from one side to the other, I'm just going to add some colour on this side, and I'm thinking I might be nearly done, but you know what happens quite often when I say that. I normally add another flower in. So I'll step back in just a second, see how it's all coming together and whether or not I need to add another flower. I've definitely got to add greenery because I can see the foam. So after lots of deliberation, I've decided to leave it as it is. One little bud tucked in underneath here, and then some greenery just to cover in on the side. This time I'm going to use some short pieces of the eucalyptus. That will help link the colours together and bring a connection with one side of the arrangement and the other. If you're planning on having a little go at this at home, then try and think about greenery that's quite soft and quite delicate, and avoid anything that's really visually heavy. It's a dainty design. The container itself is very soft, dainty, fragile looking, and that's really what you want to replicate in your flower choice. So I said at the beginning, you're either gonna love it or you're gonna hate it. So this is a very traditional design called a Hogarth Curve. I'm going to remake it in a different style container in a more modern style so that you get to compare and contrast two very different designs. You can let me know in the box below if you love it or if you hate it. It's always lovely to receive feedback. As ever, thank you very much for watching. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, then please do so. Share with your friends, your family, your flower club, your gardening club, wherever you go. So please comment in the box below and let me know what you think. Are we retro, vintage? Do you hate it? Do you love it? Thanks for watching, and goodbye for now.